As the race to dominate electric vehicles shifts from factories to infrastructure, the West is facing a new and far more dangerous challenge. It's no longer just about building cars. The real struggle is keeping them powered. Transitioning to electric vehicles isn't as simple as swapping gas tanks for batteries. It demands a historic overhaul of the electrical grid. Millions of charging stations, thousands of substations, and tens of thousands of miles of high-voltage transmission lines are required to handle surging demand. But here lies a largely overlooked crisis: the transformer bottleneck. Transformers, the unsung heroes of the power grid, convert electricity from power plants into a form that can safely charge your EV. These massive machines often weigh hundreds of tons and rely on specialized grain-oriented electrical steel. And just like batteries, the supply chain for large power transformers is dangerously concentrated in China. In the US, utilities are now waiting years for new units, sometimes as long as 4 years for a single replacement. The result is a gridlock. As millions of EVs Chinese-made or otherwise plug in, demand for electricity skyrockets. Yet the West cannot expand its grid because the hardware simply isn't available. Meanwhile, China has been quietly building an ultra-high voltage network, capable of transmitting massive amounts of renewable energy across the country efficiently. They hold the switches, the power, and the advantage. In a conflict, they wouldn't need to hack anything. They could simply stop exporting critical components. The West has traded fossil fuel independence for a system dependent on hardware controlled by a strategic competitor. And the problem doesn't stop there. The dream of a circular economy, where old batteries are recycled instead of mined, is already dominated by China. Spent batteries are processed into black mass, a toxic mixture of lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Western countries lack the regulatory flexibility to handle recycling at scale, so most of this black mass is shipped to China, securing their hold on critical minerals for decades to come. This strategic imbalance is rippling through the global auto industry. Legacy manufacturers like Ford, GM, and Volkswagen face crippling costs from outdated factories, unprofitable EV projects, and massive pension obligations. Billions are being borrowed to build EV factories that cannot compete with the cost structure of Chinese giants like BYD. This isn't just a business problem, it's a looming financial catastrophe. When these companies falter, they will drag down unions, pension funds, and local economies, creating a crisis potentially bigger than 2008. Governments will eventually face a stark choice: nationalize the auto industry or watch it collapse. At its core, the green transition isn't just expensive, it's a question of sovereignty. By outsourcing mining, refining, battery production, and now grid infrastructure to China, the West has handed control of its transportation and energy systems to a strategic rival. Every EV purchase written in the West effectively sends revenue and leverage straight to Beijing. The consequences ripple further. Inflation surges as mineral shortages hit, debt piles up, and governments will inevitably look for creative ways to cover the costs. History shows that in crises, no savings are truly safe. In 1933, the US government seized private gold to prevent economic collapse, a legal move that wiped out citizens' stored wealth. Today, similar tools may involve central bank digital currencies or bail-ins, but the principle is the same. The state will survive, even if savers don't. Meanwhile, Western automakers are waking to a sobering reality. China isn't just competing needs, dominating. While the West focused on luxury performance and long-range batteries, Chinese manufacturers invested heavily in lithium iron phosphate LFP batteries. Once dismissed as low-tech, LFPs are cheap, safe, and increasingly efficient. BYD's Blade battery, for instance, integrates the battery into the vehicle structure itself, making it safe, affordable, and highly competitive. Even Tesla now uses LFP cells for some models, illustrating the depth of China's technological lead. This innovation wave is reshaping the global market. The BYD Seagull, a compact EV released in 2023, combines style, safety, and affordability. In China, it costs around $10,000, something unthinkable for a Western manufacturer. Given labor, raw material, and union costs, the secret: BYD is vertically integrated, controlling everything from mines to battery production to shipping. They are the supply chain, not just a car maker. European automakers are panicking. Germany, once the powerhouse of internal combustion engines, is now facing a double threat. Chinese consumers prefer domestic EVs, and Chinese brands are flooding European markets. Tariffs and subsidies can slow the influx, but they cannot stop it. BYD is even planning factories in Mexico to bypass trade restrictions and maintain cost advantages. The challenge isn't only economic, it's strategic. Modern EVs are data-gathering platforms, packed with sensors, cameras, and connected systems. If 20% of vehicles on Western roads are Chinese-made, Beijing could theoretically map an entire nation in real time. And with over-the-air updates, it could disable vehicles remotely, paralyzing cities without firing a shot. National security agencies are only now grappling with this reality. China's industrial strategy compounds the threat. Overcapacity allows them to flood markets, subsidize losses, and push Western competitors toward bankruptcy. It's a war of attrition where economics and state policy converge. Meanwhile, the West faces a dilemma: block Chinese EVs and miss climate targets, or allow them and surrender industrial sovereignty. Either path carries severe consequences. The electric car, once celebrated as the future of sustainability, has become a vector of economic vulnerability. Governments have legislated the transition into existence, but they've underestimated the underlying struggle. It is not about who builds the best car. It's about who controls the minerals and the supply chain. The West assumed it could win a manufacturing race. In reality, it lost a decades-long strategic battle over resources, infrastructure, and industrial foresight. EVs aren't just vehicles. They are chemical products, reliant on lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, and manganese. To dominate the EV market, control of these minerals is far more crucial than assembly lines. China recognized this early and acted decisively, buying mines, refineries, and processing capacity worldwide. The West outsourced the dirty work, hoping to maintain environmental credibility, and in doing so, ceded strategic advantage. Now, as China tightens its grip, Western nations scramble to secure supply chains. Permitting mines and refineries takes years, while Chinese production surges. Environmental regulations slow domestic projects, creating a conflict between sustainability and industrial security. The result: China has a kill switch over the Western auto sector. Any export restriction on critical minerals could halt production within months. The stark reality is unavoidable. The West is standing at the edge of a mineral cliff, and China holds the rope. The EV revolution, meant to empower clean energy and national independence, has instead highlighted a profound strategic vulnerability, one that will shape global economics, politics, and security for decades. The West's miscalculation, isn't just a short-term inconvenience, it's a strategic blunder with long-lasting consequences. For decades, Western policymakers assumed that the electric car was primarily a manufacturing challenge. Just retool the factories, they thought, swap engines for batteries, and we'll win the race. But the reality is far more complicated. An electric vehicle is not just a car, it's essentially a chemical product on wheels. And controlling EV production doesn't hinge on assembly lines. It depends on the elements that power the battery: lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, and manganese. China understood this long before Elon Musk rolled out the first roadster. Back in the early 2000s, the Chinese Communist Party looked at the periodic table and asked a simple question: which materials will control the 21st century? Their answer reshaped the global auto industry. Instead of treating EVs as an environmental initiative, China treated them as a geopolitical lever. They systematically acquired mines, refineries, and processing facilities, ensuring that every critical link in the supply chain from raw or to battery-ready material was under Chinese control. The numbers are staggering. China now refines roughly 60% of the world's lithium, controls about 80% of cobalt processing, and nearly monopolizes the processed graphite market. Even if lithium is mined in Australia, it must be shipped to China to become battery-grade material. In this system, the West is reduced to a supplier of raw dirt, while China holds the chemistry, the know-how, and the leverage. Every Western EV, every green car sold in the United States or Europe, effectively writes a check to Beijing. Cobalt tells the story most vividly. Vital for stabilizing batteries and preventing fires, cobalt is primarily mined in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. For years, Western companies operated mines there. But in the 2010s, many sold their stakes as commodity prices fluctuated and ethical concerns mounted. Chinese firms stepped in, buying control over 15 of the 19 industrial cobalt mines in the Congo. From mine to refinery to battery pack, China controls the supply chain end-to-end. When a Ford Lightning or Volkswagen ID hits the road, much of its critical minerals have already passed through Chinese hands. Even more insidious is how China turned pollution into power. Refining lithium, cobalt, and graphite is toxic, energy-intensive, and environmentally hazardous. Western nations, bound by strict environmental regulations, were unwilling or unable to build the massive smelters required. China absorbed the environmental cost, building the plants Western governments would not allow. Outsourcing the pollution wasn't just a moral choice, it was a strategic one, allowing China to dominate both the supply chain and the industrial capacity. Now, the West faces a race it cannot win overnight. Building mines and refineries takes years 7 to 10 at a minimum. In Canada or the US, permitting alone can stretch projects even longer. Meanwhile, Chinese factories can scale in 2 years, unhindered by internal debate. This head start gives China a literal chokehold on the Western EV industry. Any export restriction on graphite, lithium, or cobalt can immediately stall production in the US, Europe, or Japan. This is not speculation, it is already happening. In late 2023, Beijing introduced export controls on graphite, requiring special permits for shipments abroad. Prices spiked, and the global market received a clear signal. China can throttle Western EV production at will. Imagine a geopolitical crisis over Taiwan. Without firing a single missile, China could halt battery production, freeze Western EV assembly lines, and cause stock prices to collapse. The green transition would grind to a halt, and Western nations would scramble to secure alternative sources they simply do not have. The strategic consequences are undeniable. By relinquishing control over critical minerals and processing, the West has traded industrial independence for a fragile, import-dependent system. Environmental idealism collided with industrial necessity, and in the clash, China emerged with a permanent advantage. Today, Western automakers are no longer just car companies, they are resource procurement operations, desperately chasing deals with mines and refineries to bypass the Chinese supply chain. Yet the math is unforgiving. The sheer volume of copper, lithium, and nickel required to replace the global fleet of combustion vehicles exceeds known reserves of economically mineable resources. The West is teetering on a mineral cliff, and China holds the rope. The EV revolution, designed to reduce emissions and boost national security, has instead exposed a profound vulnerability. The future of mobility in the West depends on the goodwill of a strategic competitor, who has spent decades positioning themselves to control it. At this point, the story of the electric vehicle isn't just about cars, it's about control, power, and sovereignty. What was supposed to be a green revolution has turned into a geopolitical minefield. Every step of the EV supply chain, from the minerals in the ground to the batteries in your car, is dominated by a single country, China. The West has voluntarily outsourced its energy independence, its industrial capability, and ultimately its strategic autonomy. Western governments assumed that transitioning to electric vehicles was a matter of engineering. Build factories, tweak production lines, and the future would arrive. But an EV is not merely a car, it's a battery on wheels. Batteries rely on materials that are scarce, geographically concentrated, and controlled by nations that may not share Western interests. Controlling a vehicle's hardware without controlling the chemical ingredients that power it is like owning the car but renting the engine. China recognized this decades ago. They bought the mines, the refineries, and the know-how. They absorbed the pollution, the regulatory hurdles, and the costs that the West refused to bear. The result is a supply chain under their command. The West, meanwhile, relied on optimism, subsidies, and hope. When environmentalism clashed with industrial necessity, industrial security lost, and the consequences are now unavoidable. The implications go far beyond economics. Modern EVs are rolling data platforms. Each car collects location data, driving behavior, and usage patterns, all of which can be leveraged in ways we're only beginning to understand. If a significant portion of vehicles in the West are manufactured by China, the potential for strategic leverage, espionage, or disruption is real. Over-the-air updates could theoretically immobilize thousands or millions of vehicles simultaneously, creating chaos without firing a single shot. This is the new reality of the EV era. It is not just a technological revolution, but a contest over resources, control, and influence. China's industrial strategy, its overcapacity, and its integrated supply chains allow it to flood markets, dominate pricing, and exert strategic pressure. For the West, there is no simple path forward. Blocking Chinese EVs risks missing climate targets and forcing citizens to pay more for inferior vehicles. Opening the door risks ceding sovereignty and industrial independence to a rival. The electric vehicle, once sold as a symbol of progress and freedom from fossil fuels, has become a mirror showing the West's strategic miscalculations. It is a vehicle of convenience and a vector of vulnerability. Policymakers and consumers alike must understand that when you buy an EV, you are not just buying a car. You are participating in a global power game shaped by supply chains, minerals, and industrial foresight. The West cannot simply out-engineer this challenge. It must rethink its approach to energy, resources, and strategic planning. The lesson is stark. Winning the electric car race is not about speed, style, or range. It is about who controls the ground the car is built on, the chemistry that powers it, and the infrastructure that keeps it moving. And on that front, the West is playing catch-up in a game that began decades ago. The EV revolution promised sustainability, progress, and independence. Instead, it has revealed vulnerability, dependency, and the high cost of strategic complacency. The green future, for all its promise, is now intertwined with global power dynamics. And unless the West confronts these realities, it risks losing not just the race for electric cars, but the autonomy and sovereignty that underpinned its modern way of life. Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video and want to stay updated with more insights on finance, make sure to subscribe to my channel, Financial Coin. And don't forget to hit that bell icon so you never miss our latest videos.